Yeah, I was really taken by Greg's work, and it was really clear to me, and I just said it like just consciously to myself a few times on set, man, this guy is a painter. I mean, he really does paint with light.
The Batman is exactly what we needed to see from DC. Well, any comic book movie franchise for that matter. We've grown accustomed to fun, bright, easy to watch blockbusters, and I mean that both figuratively and literally, because whilst it's nice to decompress once in a while, we needed a change. In today's video, I'm going to be covering everything to do with how Greig Fraser shot the Batman, looking at the equipment he used, his use of lighting, how he and Matt Reeves crafted the look, the use of Stagecraft's technology, as well as how the cinematography compares to other Batman films. Most big films like this always have shooting on film in the back of their mind. I mean, most DPs and directors prefer it, it usually ends up costing around the same, and most people just think it looks better. And there were discussions about shooting the Batman on film, but ultimately Fraser went with the Arri Alexa LF and Mini LF. With huge sensors, the best overall image quality in an Arri camera and incredible colour science, it's no surprise that Fraser chose these cameras. And with the ability to get the same image quality in a smaller form factor with the Mini LF, you have the best camera for every possible situation. They are also IMAX certified cameras, which is why we could experience it in IMAX theatres. They were tailored to the look we wanted for the film and gave Matt everything he loves. Large format, beautiful fall off, and shooting digitally meant that we could always see exactly what we were getting and fine tune the lighting really carefully. To talk more about the lenses, many of you may have heard the story that Arri made these lenses for the Batman, which simply isn't true. They were however tuned for it, and as well as Arri's new alphas, Fraser also used their Prime DNAs, Canon Crystal Expresses, and Cooke's Crystal Expresses. Now, even people that aren't into film can tell that this was shot in anamorphic, and it's all down to the pronounced characteristics of the alphas. There are tons of anamorphic lenses with a clean and crisp look, but pretty much every other mainstream film we see has this clinical feel that simply wasn't right for the Batman. The ruggedness of the lenses used only complements the story. I mean, not only is it a dark story, so having imperfect visuals creates the sense of unknowing, but the bokeh and edges just seem so distorted in a way that it helps tell the story. This is the Dark Knight. You can't walk him through a supermarket or a pharmacy and see him in all of his glory. Finding the right balance between darkness and lightness for him was the real challenge. It's well known that at least 80% of cinematography is lighting, and most of any given look starts with how you light a scene. Now, one of the few complaints I saw about this film was surrounding how dark the cinematography was, how films never used to look like this and it's just too gritty. But the fact is, we've always had films that look this dark, and this film doesn't even use darkness extensively. Obviously it's used, but not to cover anything up, and definitely not for the sake of it. I mean, for a film set almost completely at night, it's actually rather bright. We knew this could potentially be so dark it becomes unwatchable, so part of the job that I had, along with Matt, was alright, it's got to be enough that we can see, but not dark enough that we lose the mood. As for creating the dark atmosphere of Gotham, Fraser seems to want to go after that sodium vapour look of street lamps as well as fluorescence outside. Now, sodium vapour lights are pretty much just street lamps, but certain ones, especially the ones in the Batman, create a tungsten-like glow that illuminates the surrounding area in a nice orange hue. They are also really strong in fog, which is quite helpful in a couple of scenes. Now, I can't find the specific lights that Fraser actually used, but from a few behind the scenes clips that I found, it seems to be stuff like Kino flows and other large sources, but he pairs them with a lot of diffusion, as the one thing I can tell from the limited behind the scenes clips that I found is that Fraser really likes diffusion. But that's enough about the equipment side. Fraser really wanted the lights to feel natural. He didn't want lights coming in from where they shouldn't be, as even though we may not notice it as an audience as we are focusing on the story and the characters, he feels it makes a difference in your mind knowing where the light is coming from. And in my opinion, he's right. It's one of those things that if it wasn't there we would know something's off, but wouldn't be able to put our fingers on it. Now, something that adds to the lighting is the fact that the streets are often wet, and this is something that's used on Killing Them Softly. It not only looks great and creates a bit more depth in the frame, but it also underlines the fact that Gotham is a very difficult place to live. In an interview about what the film would look like, Fraser described early conversations with Reeves about wanting a very point-of-view driven noir, which if we look at Matt Reeves' other films, Cloverfield and Let Me In for example, we can see that they tend to be quite POV driven. We see the world through the eyes of the main character, and in this case, Bruce Wayne and Batman, and he wanted us as an audience to see the entire story through his eyes. You can't do a film with darkness without referencing the master, can you? Matt and I love 70s films. We love Gordon Willis's lighting, we love The Godfather. We watched Clute a number of times when we were making Let Me In, and we referenced Clute again on this. That dark underbelly of the city, it was like, how do you make that? As well as those references, Fraser and Reeves also looked towards Chinatown and All of the President's Men, as well as going back and forth on other 70s movies. Now, what's interesting about all of these different references is the fact that Fraser didn't actually look to other Batman films, and this isn't out of disrespect towards them. If anything, it's more out of respect. They didn't feel set in those worlds and wanted to explore their own world. Now, the use of colour is something that you have to touch on when talking about the look of a film, and in this it seems to be split pretty much in half. On the one hand, we have quite naturalistic, dusty, warm lighting, then on the other hand we have scenes set in strong reds and blues, with some scenes also having some quite creative lighting, especially in the nightclub. And whilst yes, it's still natural to the location, it's still a notable change. There is colour, but it's not as saturated as most movies. I wanted the colours to be dusty and a little dirty. The most prominent colour, however, is orange and any other warmer colours. And this could be for a number of things. Maybe you want the juxtaposition to an otherwise dark story. It could be to signify energy, as it often is in film, or maybe he just likes the look of warmer cinematography. But without knowing Fraser's intentions, and trust me, I've looked through so many interviews, I can't say for sure. One of the more powerful tools in cinematography is movement, and in this it feels invisible. We feel like we are flowing through the film from the eyes of Batman. It's never used just because they had a crane lying around. It's delicate, precise, and creates a sense of dependability on Bruce. We had such great sets, we had such great actors, it's such a great script. I would ask the question, why do you have to move the camera for no reason? If you're moving the camera for no good reason, I feel like you're doing all of your parts a disservice. Now, Stagecraft, or more widely known as volume, has been used extensively by Fraser, first off in The Mandalorian, but now in The Batman. And the fact that it wasn't just used for the scenes in the construction tower only go to show how invisible it's become. Now, if you're confused on what Stagecraft is, in simple terms it's an on-set virtual production. Basically just a video wall that we've seen for the past couple of decades, but developed for film and TV. You can completely surround actors in an environment, track their movements, and all in real time. Now, as for lighting these scenes, you'd expect them to do it with the surrounding panels, as they're quite literally just light, but you can't really do that. Mainly due to the fact that whilst yes, it would light them, it would be the wrong kind of light. The amount of discoloration is just unusable. However, we now have high quality lights that can replicate an image in the light by, I think, quasar science. However, I'm not sure on that. And these allow for DPs to shoot in front of an LED panel, throw some lights up all around them, and make the audience feel as though the actor is there instantly. However, I suspect Fraser was using more traditional lighting when doing these scenes. Fraser found the best time of day to use volume was late afternoon into the evening, and using a mix of geometric shapes on set creates the feeling of realism and depth. I would love it just to fade into the background, because hopefully we never think about it. Hopefully the audience doesn't ever watch a movie and go, and that was the volume. The more research I do into this technology, the more I want to do a video surrounding it, as from everything I've heard and seen, it seems like the next big leap for the technical side of filmmaking. So if you would like to see a video on it, let me know down below. We didn't look at the previous Batman films to reference, and that wasn't out of disrespect for them. It was probably more out of respect for them that we didn't feel set in those worlds. We didn't want to make a part 4. To compare the Batman to other films in the Batman universe though, there are really just 3 that grabbed my attention. Burton's Batman, the Dark Knight trilogy, and of course, Joker. Out of all of the other Batman films I've seen, I'd say that Burton's Batman is the closest visually to the Batman. Now, it is in no way similar, but it does share similar characteristics that Nolan and Snyder films don't. For one, it's darker, plays with shadows, and mostly takes place at nighttime. As well as this, we also have the relatively gloomy lighting, especially when outside in Gotham. However, the same can't be said for most interiors. The lighting is a lot harsher in the Burton films as well, whereas in the Batman, it tends to be rather soft. With The Dark Knight, I'd say the majority of the feel comes from the movement and the size of the frame. Lighting sets the mood, but the movement creates an unknowing atmosphere, and we get the same feeling from the Batman. Subtle yet defined movements, nothing over the top, and it never feels like it's done to make the scene more interesting. Now, Joker is probably the most distinct out of all of the others, but mainly because of how unique the cinematography was in contrast to all other Batman related movies. Obviously we have Lawrence Sher to thank for this, but what actually changed? Well, his use of colour was really prominent, and whilst colour definitely had meaning in Burton's Batman and The Dark Knight, you can't deny that it had the most meaning in Joker, and this seems to be brought over into the Batman. The use of warmer colours in this are like how cooler colours were used in Joker. And I do have videos on both The Dark Knight and Joker, so I'll link those in the top right corner and description below. Overall, this 3-hour epic just wouldn't have been the same without Fraser. His ability to create an atmosphere that's fresh yet doesn't feel out of place for Batman is remarkable. He used new techniques that are invisible to an audience, created a rich mood that amplifies Matt Reeves' script, and has set a new high standard for comic book movies. After Dune and Rogue One, I don't think there's anything this man can't do, and I can't wait to see what he does next. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. You know what to do if you did. If you have a recommendation for an analysis, leave it down below. Thanks so much for watching, and maybe I'll see you next time. Bye.